Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Transpower's 5th public meeting. I'm delighted to be here today representing a company that is committed to the delivery of a safe and secure supply of electricity to all New Zealand. Today you'll hear some of the highlights of the past year, our financial and operating results for the year ended 30th of June 2013, and a little bit about our plans for the future. We're also interested to hear your questions and comments, which we encourage you to ask at the end of the presentations. As you know, Transpower has two key roles. We build, maintain and operate New Zealand's high voltage electricity transmission network, the national grid, and we're the system operator responsible for the operation of the electricity system in real time. Together, these two functions ensure that New Zealanders receive that safe, secure and reliable supply of electricity. The grid itself consists of 12,000 kilometres of high voltage transmission lines running from Kaikohe to Bluff and joined with 182 substations. It's a critical part of New Zealand's electricity infrastructure as it links generators to distribution companies and major industrial users in order to get power to our homes and businesses. The important aspect that you don't see is the operation of the system operator, which quietly keeps the right amount of energy flowing to all electricity users 24 hours a day, every day of the year, and it also dispatches the wholesale electricity market. I'm pleased to report that Transpower had an excellent financial performance this year. After-tax earnings prior to net changes in the fair value of financial instruments was $268.5 million compared to $167 million for 2012. It's worth highlighting that 66.3% of that increase came from our Sydney-based subsidiary, Decipher Trade, and it's the gain on sale. We sold it in May. The balance was due to increased revenue from our newly commissioned assets. And if you discount that gain, essentially our earnings were in the order of $202 million. The board has resolved to pay a final dividend of $137 million to our shareholder to be paid in September. That brings total financial year dividends to $294.7 million, and again I would stress that that includes a special dividend of $65.7 million related to the sale of Decipher Trade. These dividends are in part as a result of the financial restructuring which we started undertaking in 2011 with increased debt on our balance sheet. The directors do place strong focus on our gearing being financially efficient but prudent, and the prudence is reflected in our strong credit ratings. Our dividends going forward will be lower because we're getting to the end of that financial restructuring. I think it's important at this point to talk about the effect of transmission on consumer pricing, something that we're very conscious of. It's an issue that affects everybody. Our pricing is set by the Commerce Commission based on an appropriate return on our assets. As new assets are commissioned, that asset base has grown and therefore our prices have increased. The dividends that we pay our shareholder has no impact on our pricing. It's important to make that distinction. And with the reinvestment in the grid the last few years, our prices have risen about 10% a year, which adds about 1% annually to total home or businesses' electricity bills. We expect to have one more significant rise this year coming into effect 1 April 2014 as the last of our major projects go live. This reinvestment was necessary to restore resilience to the grid following a long period of low investment and falling prices. The chart shows transmission prices over time, and you can see from the solid blue line that in real or inflation adjusted terms our prices for a typical residential customer will actually be at the same level they were in the early 90s. Our share of the bill has also, an overall consumer's bill, has also fallen from about 16% to less than 10%, as the graph shows, and we would expect it to stay in that region. Electricity is important, and so is pricing. I've borrowed a slide from Transpower, an address that was given at their AGM. This shows the change in residential pricing over the last 20 years and actually points out that the major contributors to electricity price increases have been in the removal of the very large cross-subsidy that used to apply between commercial and industrial customers and in favour of residential customers in the 90s, an increase in energy costs as our cheap Maui gas has run down, and of course GST. And as I've noted, Transpower's prices in real terms on an inflation-adjusted basis have not actually increased. We are doing our part, nevertheless, to try and ensure that we keep our prices as low as possible while maintaining a secure transmission service. And we expect transmission price increases to flatten out from 1 April 2015 and possibly even start to drop as the use of technology to optimise the capacity we have built starts to pay off. Transpower has had a strong year in delivering to its key objectives. I'll just talk about a few of them here. As I've said, we are very focused on getting more out of the transmission lines that have been built in order to try and avoid building more. So we must protect these lines, particularly from the uncontrolled underbuild which has occurred in the past, particularly around our cities as they have grown. This can inhibit our ability to use and maintain these lines at a great cost to the whole country. We've been working closely with district councils throughout the country to implement a consistent buffer zone approach whilst minimising the impact on landowner activities. And we're very grateful for the positive and engaging discussions and relationships we've had with groups the likes of Federated Farmers and Horticulture New Zealand, who we've worked jointly with in an endeavour to develop an appropriate solution for all parties. We commissioned 2 out of our 3 major capital projects this year, the transmission line through the Waikato to Auckland, known as NIGUP, and the HVDC Pole 3 project. We expect to finish the 3rd new cable forming a transmission ring around Auckland before Christmas. These have all been large, complex projects which have totalled nearly $2 billion in spend. We exceeded our budget on the Waikato line upgrade by a little less than 10%, but it's worth pointing out that this will be more than offset by savings against budget on the other 2, which, from an overall perspective and a standing start, I think is a pretty outstanding achievement. I mentioned earlier that we sold our Sydney-based subsidiary Decipher Trade in May of this year to the Australian Stock Exchange for approximately $65 million. Transpower grew this company from a 3-person startup 11 years ago, and it's a very successful trading company based in Sydney, trading in energy derivatives, and it still only has 3 people. However, its future development opportunities are not and were not core business for Transpower, and the ASX was in a much better position to take the company through its next phase of development, and so we sold it. We're very focused on our core business. I should note, though, that in New Zealand, the electricity awarded our EMS unit the contract to run a new market for financial transmission rights on the electricity system. EMS is also under the sponsorship of a number of major gas companies, just starting New Zealand's first spot gas trading system. So we are still endeavouring to try and add value to New Zealand Inc. using our specialist capabilities where it makes sense. Finally, it would be remiss of me not to mention that this will be the last public meeting that Patrick Strange will attend, at least as our CEO. I know I speak for the whole board and the industry, Patrick, in saying that you've done an outstanding job, and it's not over yet, by the way, in taking Transpower forward with respect to the three major projects, with respect to efficiency gains, long-term planning, and significant improvements in our wider community, industry, and stakeholder relations. We wish you well when you leave Transpower, and thank you for your considerable contribution to the company and indeed to New Zealand. Our stated intent amongst the board is to take forward and carry further the legacy that Patrick has left us to carry on with, which is pretty formidable. I'll now hand over to Howard Cattermole, our Chief Financial Officer, to discuss our 2013 financial performance in more detail.